I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. That one day, I'd sit here and share the story that shattered my life. To be honest, I'm not the type to share personal experiences with the world. I've always been someone who deals with problems silently. But now I can't stay silent. Because what happened is something that will make you think. Maybe you'll start looking at your own relationships differently. Sometimes the truth comes at the most unexpected moment. It doesn't knock on your door or give you time to prepare. It just crashes down on you like a wave, sweeping away everything in its path. And you either accept it or it drowns your life, your peace, everything you've spent years building. This story isn't for entertainment. It's not fiction, not part of some movie or series. This is reality. My reality. What happened to me a few months ago started with small details I didn't even notice at first. And if someone had told me then that these small suspicions would grow into a devastating truth, I wouldn't have believed them. I would have said, "That's impossible." Not her. Not us. Emily and I were together for 7 years. 7 years. It's not just a number. It's a lifetime. It's thousands of moments. The first meeting, the first trips, the first dreams. I always thought I was lucky. I'd found a woman who was my best friend, my partner, and that special someone they write about in books and sing about in songs. Emily was everything to me. She always knew how to support me. Even in the hardest moments, when we had no money, when we slept on the floor of our first apartment and dreamed of a better life, she never complained. She would just look at me and say, "We'll make it, Josh. I believe in us." And I believed too. I believed in us more than anything else in the world. But here's what I'll tell you. When the person you trust most starts hiding something, that's the scariest feeling in the world. You suddenly realize that the world you thought you knew might be a lie. The first suspicion seemed silly. She started staying late at work. I joked, "What? Has your new boss signed you up for a marathon of meetings?" She smiled, a bit tired but tender, and said, "It's temporary, babe. Things will get better soon." I believed her. Why wouldn't I? This was Emily. My Emily. But deep inside, something had already started to change. A tiny voice in my head whispered, "Something's not right." I tried to silence it. Then the evidence appeared, things I couldn't ignore. Her phone became an extension of her body. She no longer left it on the nightstand or the kitchen counter. If before we could sit together watching a movie, now she was constantly checking the screen. And you know what hurt the most? How she started placing her phone face down when I was around. "Emily, what's on your phone?" I'd ask, trying to keep calm. "Nothing important," she'd reply with the same smile that used to reassure me, but now only irritated me. The more I tried to convince myself that it was all nothing, the louder that voice in my head became. "Josh, don't be blind. Face the truth." I didn't want to. I didn't want to see. But the truth is like that. You can close your eyes, but it will find you anyway. And when it does, it will destroy you completely. This story started with small suspicions, but ended by shattering me into 1,000 pieces. I'm not telling you this to garner pity. I'm telling you because I feel obligated to share the truth. Because if it happened to me, it could happen to anyone. What I saw through the hidden camera was something I wasn't ready for. Not then, not now. But I'll show you everything. I'll tell you every detail, because sometimes the truth is all that's left when there's nothing else of you. Emily and I had been together for 7 years. It wasn't just a marriage. It was my life, my foundation. Together, we built everything. From our first apartment with secondhand furniture to this house, where I finally felt at home. I always thought we were the perfect team. No matter what, we'd always stick together. I trusted her more than I'd ever trusted anyone in my life. Emily was the woman who could change everything with just a smile. I could come home after a terrible day at work, and she'd greet me with my favorite tea, asking, "So, who got to you more today? The boss or the clients?" We'd laugh together, joke, and the whole world seemed simple and understandable. But now, it feels like trying to remember the Emily I once knew and figuring out who's standing in front of me now. 3 months ago, everything began to change. It happened gradually, like drops filling an empty glass until it overflowed. The first red flag appeared when she started staying late at work. It sounded perfectly normal. We all work. We all have deadlines. She'd come home late, her eyes tired, and say, "Josh, I'm sorry, it was a horrible day. I just want to shower and to go to bed." I believed her. Why wouldn't I? This was Emily, the woman I knew as well as the back of my hand. But even then, somewhere deep in my mind, a tiny voice spoke up, quiet but persistent. "Something's not right." Then came the phone. She'd never been attached to it before. She could leave it in another room or forget about it for half a day. But now, she never let it out of her sight. The phone became her shadow. Every time it buzzed or rang, she'd grab it so quickly, as if afraid I might see something. One evening, I noticed her texting during dinner. I pretended not to see, but my eyes drifted to her hands. She was holding the phone, so the screen was turned away from me. I tried to joke. "What's going on? Are you saving the world with the Avengers?" She looked up, smiled a little, and replied, "No, it's just Amanda. She's always fighting with her boyfriend. I'm helping her out." Amanda, her old friend. I'd known her since Emily's college days. But why was Amanda suddenly so important? Why were they talking so much again? With each passing day, my paranoia grew. I tried convincing myself it was all nonsense. But every time Emily left the room with her phone to answer a call or turned the screen down when I was nearby, I felt something freeze inside me. One evening, she stepped into the hallway and spoke on the phone in a hushed tone. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but her voice was soft. The words she spoke weren't the kind exchanged with colleagues or friends. I moved closer and caught only one phrase. "No, not now. I'll find the time." My heart sank. She'll find the time? For whom? For what? I stood there in the dark, trying to convince myself it wasn't what I thought. A few days later, I accidentally found a receipt from a restaurant in her coat pocket. A simple piece of paper, but it burned in my hand like a hot coal. The date and time. It was the same evening she said she was working late. I held that receipt, staring at it, unsure what to think. Was she lying? Or was it just a coincidence? I tried to collect my thoughts, but with every passing second, one phrase echoed in my mind. Something's not right. The final straw was her look. The final straw was her look. I can't explain it, but when she looked at me, there was nothing there anymore. Her eyes used to be filled with love and understanding. Now they were empty, as if she was somewhere far away, in another place. I couldn't take it anymore and asked her directly, "Emily, what's going on? We're drifting apart. Is everything okay?" She didn't even flinch. Her voice was calm and confident. "Josh, you're imagining things. Work has just been exhausting. I've seen it." But I wasn't fine anymore. Those little moments, the phone or late-night calls, the receipt from the restaurant, they all came together into a big picture I didn't want to see. I was like someone standing on the edge of a cliff. Part of me was terrified to take a step forward, but the other part couldn't turn back. That evening, when she locked herself in the bathroom again with her phone, speaking to someone, I made a decision. I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't ignore what was happening right in front of me. I had to know the truth, and I didn't yet realize that the truth I'd uncover would change my life forever. Everything I'd noticed over the past few weeks was driving me insane. It felt like an endless puzzle, each piece raising more questions but offering no answers. I couldn't sleep at night, lying in the dark, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of everything. But every time I convinced myself it was just my imagination, something new would appear, a tiny detail that shattered all my attempts to calm down. The late calls. Emily never used to get calls after 9 p.m., but now, her phone vibrated even close to midnight. One night, when I heard it buzz in the silence, my heart jumped into my throat. She quietly left the room, clutching the phone to her chest as if afraid I might see the screen. I lay in bed listening. I could hear her voice in the hallway. A whisper, faint phrases. I couldn't make out the words, but her tone was unusual, gentle, almost intimate. "What are you doing, Josh?" I murmured to myself, clenching my fist around the blanket. "You're losing it. It's just work. Or maybe Amanda." That would have been the simplest explanation, but it didn't reassure me. Deep down, I knew it wasn't Amanda. The new perfume. Emily always wore the same fragrance I'd given her on our anniversary 2 years ago. A warm, sweet scent that I always associated with her. One day, when I hugged her, I noticed something different. A light, fresh scent, expensive, but completely unfamiliar. I pulled back and jokingly asked, "What's this new perfume? Did I miss something?" She froze for a moment, then smiled as if it was nothing. "It's a gift from a colleague at work. She said it would suit me." A gift from a colleague? I smiled back, but inside, I was burning. Why doesn't anyone at work give me gifts? Why did her colleague think they knew better than I did what scent suited her? The receipt from the restaurant. That was the moment my suspicions began turning into paranoia. I found it by accident. We were getting ready to go to dinner at a friend's place, and I was looking for my keys in her coat. Instead, I found a receipt from a restaurant where Emily and I had never been together. I stared at that piece of paper as if it were evidence of a crime. The date and time, it was the same evening she'd said she was working late. I stood in the middle of our bedroom, clutching this small piece of paper, feeling the ground crumble beneath me. Josh, it could just be a coincidence, I told myself, but my mind was relentless. What if it's not a coincidence? What if she wasn't alone? Who was she with? I heard her speaking in the kitchen, and her voice sounded distant, almost unreal. Images started forming in my mind, her sitting at a table with someone else, laughing, looking at them the way she used to look at me. It broke me. The inner battle. That night, I didn't sleep. I tossed and turned, feeling like my mind was a battlefield. One voice told me I was going crazy, that it was all just my imagination. Another voice, deeper and darker, said, "She's hiding something. Until you figure it out, you won't be able to breathe." My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. I glanced at Emily, sleeping peacefully beside me, and asked myself, what happened to us? Is it my fault? Or has she changed? But instead of answers, there was only one thought in my head. I have to know the truth. The decision. The next evening, Emily told me she was going to meet a friend. Anxiety consumed me as I watched her get ready. I no longer believed her words. I watched her put on a dress I'd never seen before, and every movement she made only fueled the fire of my suspicions. When the door closed behind her, I stopped hesitating. I opened the closet, took out the small hidden camera I had bought a few days earlier, and went into the living room. I placed it among the books on the shelf, a tiny lens, nearly invisible. I adjusted the angle and pressed record. At that moment, I felt like the worst person in the world. I asked myself, Josh, is this a betrayal of trust? Or are you just trying to protect yourself from even greater pain? But the answer was simple and harsh. I need to know. I just need to know the truth. I turned off the lights and sat on the couch, staring into the darkness. My heart was pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I told myself this was just a test, that I would either see the truth or realize I'd been paranoid. But deep down, I already knew. I knew I was about to see something I wasn't ready for. And that truth would change everything. The morning after. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of dread that was impossible to ignore. My mind was clouded. I knew I would have to confront something I wasn't prepared for. I made coffee, but it sat untouched on the table. My hands trembled as I retrieved the memory card from the camera and inserted it into my laptop. The screen lit up, a black background, a play button. My finger hovered over the key. I couldn't breathe. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, repeating to myself, "This is just a test, Josh. You won't see anything. She's your wife. You're just imagining things." But deep down, I already knew that wasn't true. The recording begins. The recording began. The first thing I saw was our living room. So familiar, so evident. The couch where we always sat together, the coffee table, the shelf where I'd hidden the camera among the books. Emily entered the frame. She had just come home. She looked the same as always. She took off her coat, threw her bag on the couch, and walked around the room. I watched the screen, searching for any hint of unusual behavior, but saw nothing. She walked to the couch, sat down, and pulled out her phone, scrolling through it. 5 minutes. 10. I started to calm down. I even felt a little foolish. "You're an idiot, Josh," I muttered to myself. "You really thought she was cheating on you? You went too far." But then, there was a knock at the door. The sound on the recording was so loud it startled me. My heart stopped. On the screen, Emily looked up. Her face froze for a second. She glanced at the door, then at her phone, as if checking the time. "Who is it?" I whispered, as if she could hear me. Emily got up from the couch, adjusted her hair, and walked to the door. Each of her steps sounded like a gunshot in the silence. She reached the door, paused for a moment, and opened it without looking through the peephole. He appeared on the screen. Mike. The same Mike she had called just a friend a few weeks ago. He stood at the door with a smile on his face and a large bag in his hand. He walked into our home, my home, as if he belonged there. Emily smiled back at him. They exchanged a few words I couldn't hear. But the way she looked at him, I'd seen that look before. It was the look that used to belong to me. Mike set his bag down on the floor and sat on the couch. Emily went to the kitchen and returned with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. My heart clenched. "What kind of joke is this, Emily?" I whispered, gripping the table. "He's just a friend, right? Just a friend?" They sat on the couch together, drinking wine and talking. I watched her laugh at his jokes. That laugh. It was light, genuine. The same laugh she used to share with me. Mike leaned in closer and said something that made her laugh even harder. She even put her hand on his shoulder, casually, as if it was nothing. I watched this, feeling waves of anger and despair wash over me. "Emily, what are you doing?" I shouted into the empty room, knowing they couldn't hear me. The envelope. Suddenly something changed. Mike pulled out a small black envelope from his bag and handed it to Emily. She took it, looked at it carefully, and opened it. She pulled out a set of keys. I couldn't see exactly what they were, but my heart raced even faster. Emily nodded and whispered, "Are you sure this will work?" Mike replied, just as quietly, but confidently, "He won't suspect a thing. Trust me." I felt my throat go dry. Work? What was supposed to work? What were they planning? Emily tucked the keys in her pocket and walked up to Mike. She placed her hand on his cheek, and that moment was the final straw for me. That was the moment everything I believed in shattered into pieces. This was too much. I slammed the laptop shut with such force that I almost broke it. I sat in silence, breathing heavily. My head was spinning, and my hands were trembling. It felt like the ground beneath me had disappeared. Everything I believed in, everything I had built with Emily, was destroyed in just a few minutes. This isn't just betrayal, I whispered. It's something more. They're planning something. I didn't know what exactly, but I knew one thing. This recording was only the beginning. I forced myself to keep watching, even though every fiber of my being screamed for me to stop. My eyes were glued to the screen, and my heart pounded so loudly it drowned out all other sounds. Mike pulled out a small black box from his bag and placed it on the table. I stared at it as if it could somehow answer all my questions. What was it? A gift? Something work-related? Or something far worse? Emily leaned forward slightly, her face calm, but there was a glint of curiosity in her eyes. She looked at Mike and asked, "Is this everything?" That word, everything, lodged itself in my brain. What did she mean? What were they doing? Mike nodded and replied, almost in a whisper, but his voice was confident and cold. "Yes. After this, he won't suspect a thing." My breath caught. A cold sweat ran down my back. What did that mean? Who was he? Were they talking about me? My hands clenched into fists. I wanted to scream, but it was just a recording. I couldn't change anything. I just sat there, watching them sit on my couch and discuss what? Plans? A scheme? Emily opened the box, and I saw her take out some papers. They looked like documents, but I couldn't make out what was written on them. She skimmed through them quickly, her eyes darting across the lines, then nodded. "Is everything here?" she asked again. "Down to the smallest detail," Mike replied. My heart raced even faster. What were those documents? What were they planning? Emily looked up at him with a smile. The same smile I used to see every evening. But this time it felt different, fake cold. "He won't suspect a thing," she repeated, as if convincing herself. Mike smiled back and leaned closer. "Josh has never been suspicious. He trusts you so much that he'll sign anything without even looking." I felt my throat tighten. They were talking about me. This wasn't a joke. It was something serious, something I had no idea about. A voice in my head started screaming. "What are those papers? What is she doing? Are they trying to trick me? Take something from me?" I tried to breathe, but my thoughts were spiraling. Everything I had built with Emily felt fake at that moment. My wife, the woman I loved more than anything, was sitting on my couch, scheming against me with another man. Emily picked up a pen from the table. She hesitated for a second and looked at Mike. Her face grew serious. What if he finds out? What then? Mike didn't hesitate for even a moment. His voice was cold and firm. "He won't find out. By the time he does, it'll already be done." Done? I felt nauseous. What did that mean? What were they planning to do? I watched the screen, unable to believe my eyes. Emily was signing something. Her hand didn't tremble. She was calm, focused, as if it was just another day, as if she wasn't destroying everything we had built together. Moments later, she turned to Mike and asked, "Are you sure we'll get away with this?" Mike raised his glass of wine, as if celebrating some kind of victory, and said, "Emily, everything is under control. You won't even realize what happened until it's too late." It was a blow. The final blow I couldn't take. My mind refused to accept what I was seeing. I slammed the laptop shut so hard that it nearly broke. I sat there in silence, breathing heavily. My hands trembled, and my eyes burned with tears. Anger. Helplessness. Shock. I felt all of it at once. I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just about betrayal. This was about manipulation, deception, and something far darker. And I wasn't going to let it slide. How could she? The thought wouldn't leave my mind. Emily, the woman I trusted more than anyone in the world, who promised to always be by my side, was conspiring behind my back. With someone I didn't even truly know. What do they want to do? What are these documents? What are their plans? I could no longer think rationally. All I knew was that my world no longer existed. I had lost control of the situation, and the worst part, I didn't even know what exactly I was being deceived about. Emily, what have you done? I whispered into the darkness, but there was no answer. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was about something bigger, about a scheme that could take everything from me. I didn't know what was coming next, but I knew one thing. I would find out the truth. And this time, I wouldn't let them fool me. When Mike pulled a box out of his bag and placed it on the table, my heart froze. It was an ordinary item, nothing special at first glance, but my intuition was already screaming. Something's wrong here. Something big and terrifying. Emily didn't look surprised. She didn't even ask what it was. She sat next to him on the couch, as if she'd been waiting for this moment. Her eyes quickly scanned the box. Then she looked up and asked, her voice disturbingly calm, "Is this everything?" "This is everything." Two simple words, but they sounded like a verdict. Mike nodded, opening the box, and replied quietly but confidently, "Yes. After this, he won't suspect a thing." My hands clenched into fists. I felt my blood run cold. That was me. I couldn't be mistaken. They were talking about me. But what exactly were they planning? What was this, everything? Emily leaned over the box and pulled out papers. They looked like documents. She took them in her hands, scanned them with her eyes, and asked, her voice tinged with unease, "Are you sure this will be enough?" Mike smiled. His smile was cold and arrogant. He picked up a glass of wine from the table, took a sip, and replied, "It'll be enough. Trust me, he won't suspect a thing. We've thought of everything down to the last detail." Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. I sat in front of the screen, unable to believe my eyes and ears. My wife, the woman I trusted more than anyone in the world, was sitting on the couch in our home, conspiring with her friend against me. But what exactly were they planning? Emily glanced at the documents one more time and nodded, as if finally making up her mind. "What if he decides to check?" she asked. Mike didn't flinch. His voice was calm and cold, like the edge of a blade. "He won't check. Josh trusts you more than he trusts himself. He'll sign anything you put in front of him. Just don't give him time to think." My breath caught in my throat. Sign? What exactly do they want me to sign? What are they planning? Emily sighed and put the documents back in the box. I watched as she ran her hand through her hair, as if trying to shake off the tension. She looked guilty. For a moment, I thought she might reconsider, that she might stand up and tell Mike this was all a mistake. But she didn't. She raised her eyes to him and said, "I don't want him to get hurt. I just want this to go smoothly." Mike's grin grew wider as he placed a hand on her shoulder. That gesture, the way he touched her, the way he looked at her, felt like a dagger to my heart. He replied, "Trust me, it'll go perfectly. By the time he realizes what happened, we'll already be far away. We'll already be far away." Those words echoed in my head. I couldn't hold myself back any longer. I slammed the laptop shut with such force, I nearly broke it. The room fell silent, but inside me, a storm was raging. My thoughts swirled like debris after an explosion. What are they planning? What are those documents? Why does she want me to sign something? And why is she saying they'll be far away? Everything clicked into place. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a conspiracy. They were planning to take something far more than my marriage or my love. They wanted to destroy everything I had. I sat in the darkness, breathing heavily. My mind swung from rage to despair and back again. I thought about Emily, the woman I had shared my life with, the woman I loved more than I loved myself. How could she do this to me? When had it started? And most importantly, why? I needed answers. I needed to understand how I could have missed this. Had I been so blind? Or was she just that good of an actress? I stood up from my chair and paced the room. My head felt heavy, like it was filled with lead. I looked up at the wall where our family photo hung. Emily smiled at me from it. The smile that once meant the world to me now looked like a mask. "I will find the truth," I whispered, clenching my fists. "I'll find out what they're planning. And this time, I won't let them fool me." This was no longer just betrayal. This was something far bigger, a plan that could take away everything I had built in my life. I didn't know how deep it went, but I knew one thing. I couldn't trust anyone anymore. "Emily, you wanted to deceive me? Now I'll stay one step ahead." This was my last chance to uncover the truth, and I wasn't about to lose it. I turned off the recording and sat in the suffocating silence. The room was so quiet that I could hear only my heavy breathing and the pounding of my heart. It was racing as if it wanted to break out of my chest. My hands trembled, my fingers curled into fists, and my mind repeated one word over and over. How? How could she do this to me? Emily, the woman I gave everything to. My years, my trust, my love. Now she was destroying me behind my back, and I didn't even know how far it had gone. I stared at the laptop screen. Its blank darkness after the recording symbolized the emptiness growing inside me. Anger, despair, shock. They all fused into a single torrent that left me unable to speak or think. I got up and walked to the window. Outside, the world was still the same. A typical morning with neighbors walking their dogs, kids playing in the yard. But my world had been shattered. I looked at my reflection in the glass. The person staring back at me was unrecognizable. Red-rimmed eyes from tears, a face twisted with anger and pain. Her voice from the recording echoed in my head. "Josh won't suspect a thing." Won't suspect? I had suspected. I had seen it. And now they would regret underestimating me. My first instinct was to call Emily, to scream, to demand answers, to tell her everything I thought of her. But I stopped myself. Something inside whispered, "Don't rush. Don't give them the advantage. Play fair, but on your terms." I wiped my face with my hands and walked back to the table. My phone lay next to the laptop. I picked it up and opened her contact, but instead of calling, I hit the voice message button. My tone was cold and merciless. "Emily, I need you to come home as soon as possible. We need to talk." I sent the message and felt, for the first time in hours, a clear sense of purpose. I didn't yet know exactly how I would do it, but I would make her pay. This wouldn't be loud, dramatic, or dangerous. No, but it would be significant. Something she'd remember forever. The hours dragged by endlessly. I paced the room, trying to collect my thoughts. Every word from the recording echoed in my mind like a curse. "He'll sign anything. He won't suspect a thing." I couldn't let them win. They wanted to take everything from me? Fine. But first, I would take from Emily the one thing she valued most, her illusion of control. Was my revenge justified? I hadn't planned any dramatic scenes. No shouting, no broken dishes, no fiery confrontations. My revenge was quiet. It wasn't loud or humiliating. It was deliberate. And that's what made it cut so deep. That day, knowing Emily would return home, I steadied my mind. I prepared everything. No hysteria, no weak spots for her to exploit. I was cold and calm, like I was playing the final move in a chess game, one I was certain to win. I took her favorite storage box, the one she had used when we moved into this house, and placed it on the living room table. Inside, I carefully packed the things she held dear. Her books that she read on the couch, her cozy sweaters that always hung on my chair, the photos from our wedding. The other memories, the empty, deceitful ones, I threw away. At that moment, I felt no pain, no regret, only resolve. When Emily opened the door, I was already sitting on the couch. She walked in, bringing with her the scent of new perfume and a false smile. She froze when she saw me. I was calm, too calm for a man who had just watched his life unravel on a laptop screen. "Josh, what's wrong?" she asked, a hint of nervousness in her voice. I didn't respond right away. I just looked at her for a long time, silently, as if I was trying to burn this moment into my memory. Then, slowly, I nodded toward the box on the table. "Sit down," I said. My voice was cold, sharp as a blade. She glanced at the box, then at me. The calm on her face dissolved, replaced by unease. "What's this?" she whispered. "It's yours," I replied evenly. "Your things. Pack them." She moved closer and perched on the edge of the couch. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for an explanation. Finally, she said, "Josh, what's going on? Why are you acting so strange? Did I do something?" I laughed, bitterly. "Short. Did something? Emily, I know everything. Every word. Every plan. I know about Mike. And I know about the papers you were planning to make me sign." Her face contorted in shock. She opened her mouth to speak, but I raised my hand to stop her. "Don't bother, Emily. Don't bother with excuses. You wanted to destroy me? To take everything from me? Congratulations. You failed." She began to panic. "Josh, it's not what you think. Let me explain." I rose from the couch and stepped closer, so close that she instinctively leaned back. I stared into her eyes and spoke in the calmest voice I could muster. "Explain? There's nothing you can say. Your words mean nothing to me now. Pack your things and get out of my house." Emily started crying. Tears streamed down her face, but they no longer had power over me. Once, they would have shattered me. Today, I felt nothing. I walked to the bedroom, leaving her alone in the silence and emptiness. Closing the door behind me, I sat on the edge of the bed for a moment. I could hear her sobbing in the living room. Did it hurt me? Yes, but it was a necessary pain. She had lost her hold on me. That was my revenge. Quiet, calm, but most importantly, decisive. What do you think about his revenge? Would you have done something differently?